Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to the second channel demographics video. This is something I've wanted to talk about for a while, and what better opportunity than China officially allowing couples to have 3 children. You might have heard of the one-child policy, which was in place until 2016 when it was replaced with a 2-child policy. Again, very exciting development, double the number of children, and now in just 2021, 5 years later, we've seen President Xi Jinping confirm that there will in fact be a 3-child policy. You can have 3 times as many children as you could in 2016, which is really interesting to look at. And although there's a part of this story that is human rights organization based, because Amnesty International says this is a violation of sexual and reproductive rights, what do you mean the government telling you how many children you can have is a violation of your rights? What do you mean that governments have no business regulating how many children people have? I think there should be more and more control of your fundamental rights by governments. I don't understand this opinion in the slightest, but obviously more seriously, there's an interesting story about that. But I think the much more interesting story is, why would a government which has the ability to regulate how many children its citizens have, why would they go from 1 child in 2016 to 3 children now? And again, the simple answer to that is, by the way, this isn't just on one place. Look, you can see on Al Jazeera in case you think it's British foreign imperialist media or something. But like, why would you go from that? And the simple answer is, oh yeah, instead of trying to pull the brakes on population growth, instead of trying to slow down the country, now China is desperately trying to speed it up again. They have a big problem. And to explain why that is, allow me to do something I've wanted to talk about for a while: population pyramids. I feel like it comes up every now and then for a single country, but I want to just talk about population pyramids for a dumb amount of time today, because the population of the world and the demographics of the world fascinate me. I mean, the fact that in 1950 we had 2.7 billion people, my bad, got literally off by a factor of 1,000, and now we have 7 billion and we're expected to peak out about 10 billion. That is fascinating. The fact that the world population has quadrupled, and you can see this happening because if we look at this pyramid right here, this bottom rung has the people aged 0 to 4, then 5 to 9, 10 to 14. Basically, every rung represents 5 years of age, and this tells you how a population is growing or shrinking, basically, and it also tells you where it's going to hit certain ages. So right now, we're kind of living in a golden age of the world because most people are not retired. Most people are working or about to be working for the world. So we have a very heavy population growth, which means lots of child care focused things, worldwide level I mean, and then we have a lot of work-based things, and then like retirement is like the thing that like most people don't get to do yet. Again, that's going to grow and grow and grow, but we're going to keep on having a growing population to make sure that this pyramid keeps going like that. This is probably like the best phase you can be in terms of, it means you're growing and it means that you're very much expanding productivity. But China's graph looks like this instead. Again, you can see how they were doing a pretty good job of doing that same kind of. Again, the two ones you want are, you want flat and you want like triangular. You want either growth or you want sustained kind of flatness. But instead, China has something that looks like this. And it's fascinating because China, I actually didn't know until I took this. I always knew China had a population growth problem recently. As you can see, there are lots of people aged 30 to 34 in the best earning phase of their career, 65. Seriously, by the way, the number of people aged 30 to 34 in China is 126 million people. To put that in perspective, that is more people than live in, about the same number of people who live in Japan, and is only less than, there are more people in age 30 to 34 in China than there are people in the UK as a whole. Seriously, it's quite substantial too. Almost double as many as live in the UK as a whole. More than live in any European country besides Russia. That's how many people are just aged 30 to 34. It's a huge number of people. And my long story short, man, that is really intense actually. More people, like, it's the same number of people 30 to 34 in China as all of the ages in Japan, which, by the way, Japan has had this problem for a while, and it's why instead of being the economic tiger you always expect it to be, Japan has a problem of like this. Instead of having a triangle upwards, they have a triangle going like this. Every year, more people retire and they're not replaced by enough people in the workforce, and every year, people don't have enough babies to replace the babies from the year before, and it's a problem that's growing and growing and growing. You can talk about a whole bunch of reasons why, but it means their population graph, instead of increasing, again, the world population is increasing and then about to stabilize by the end of the century. Japan's population already reached that peak, and it's started to fall already. It's going to fall pretty drastically to the stage where they could have half their population gone in the next 100 years. It's pretty crazy. And so coming back to China, because this video is we have to at least talk about China a fair amount. China has one of the wackiest graphs because you can see it's not that or that. It's a weird kind of hybrid. And the reason why, we could talk about the Great Leap Forward and, the fact that that was about, basically trying to, urbanize people and killing 15 to 55 million people. I mean, are we going to trust Wikipedia's claim that, oh yeah, doing crazy policies collectively can kill 15 to 55 million people? Which, by the way, the number of people killed is just like just as like, oh yeah, we needed to industrialize, we'll kill between 15 and 55 million. That's more people than live in like 90%, 85% of the world's countries. That's a Spain or a South Korea. Or if we go with the low estimate, that's a Syria or a Netherlands number of people killed. Anyway, so I just want to talk about population numbers today. Can we just do that? Check out the video now if you want to hear about China stuff. Let's just talk about population pyramids, because it's fascinating because they, obviously they killed a bunch of people, they industrialized a bunch of people, moved them to the cities, and then so they had fewer children, partly because of one-child policies, etc. And basically that means there's this big dip where here you can see the downsides from the people who were alive during the Great Leap Forward, not having as many children. And then you can see there's a funny dip because their children had a bunch of children there, but then you can see the exact same dip afterwards. There's this echo of population pyramids where you could have a really inconsistent population just like this. If you kill people now, it doesn't just mean that they're gone, it means they can't have children. And so there's ripple effects of that all throughout history. Just like, during the World War II, like a huge number of Soviet men lost their lives, but they were all specifically like aged 18 to like 25 or something. And that will, I bet we can still find it on Russia's, actually it was like almost 100 years ago now, but I reckon you can still maybe just about see it in terms of their male-female balance. Yeah, look at this, because it's men that go to war. Look at this. Look at the number, like it's balanced right now. There are more men than women, but look at when you go really far back, aged 80 to 84, there are almost 3 times as many women as men, because guess what happens to the men? They die, and then that kind of ripples throughout history and has weird stuff like this. It's fascinating, right? Countries, if we look at a more recent example that hasn't yet to ripple, Cambodia, something happened about 40 years ago. When did they kill a bunch of people? I can't tell you for sure. You can look into that one on yourself. But they had this terrible revolution, and it means that all of a sudden the population pyramid, which should look like this, has an interesting dip in it over here that then again led to a boom. But then the children they should have had, it's very, very interesting to look at. Anyway, so let's go back to China and let's talk about the fact that China desperately, if they want to be a great successful country and rule world, I don't know why I'm doing that in Russian, or like, in Soviet Russia, population pyramid looks at you or whatever voice. But my point here is, so they need to get their pyramid going back like that. How do you do that? You get a bunch of people to have children. How do you do that? Well, it's a good thing as the government, you have the control of how many children people can have, irrespective of human rights policies. And so you increase the number of children they can have. There's an interesting question here is like, if it's not working, again, you can see in the last 5 years, even though, this would have been 2016 when it was a one-child policy. This is the last 5 years since having a two-child policy. You can see how the number of children hasn't increased. They allowed people to have more children, but it's too late. Once they reach this phase of the graph, again, every industrialized country that isn't big on immigration, you'll see this in. So again, Japan is the classic example of it's a very homogenous country. They don't really like immigrants. They don't mind visitors, but they're not big on you staying there. As you can see, the population decreases year on year on year. Why is that? Why do Japanese people have fewer children? Something about really heavy wealth and industrialization does that to a country. Some people attribute it down to the simple fact if you have more money, so your children don't die, and if you know your children are going to survive, you have the number you want rather than just like, oh, I'll just have 10 children and see how many survive. That, to me, that seems a little simplistic, but it's got to be part of it. The bigger thing seems to be access to education, access to birth control, access to choosing to have a family versus not. It's not just a thing that happens now, it's a thing you've got to plan for. And honestly, who is ready, who can actually be 100% sure they want children? Not most people. So you just do it by some weird accident, or basically you have to be very ready for it. And it happens much later in your life, but then later in your life, it's harder. And then it's all passed you by. And so a lot of people just fall out of that net. Also, fewer people are having relationships in general, which is a fascinating part of, again, there's lots of trends we can talk about there. And there's lots of reasons why this happens. But if we then look at a country like, I think Nigeria is one of the bigger population growers in the world. So if we look at Nigeria, you can see that they are growing at such an absurd rate. Seriously, from 20 years ago, like the number of people aged 100 plus is 11 and 15. The number of people aged 0 to 4 is 17 million and 16 million. That is, to put that in comparison to an aging country, I think Spain is aging, right? I'm pretty sure Spain is aging. There are 11,000, about 12,000 people aged 100 plus to just 2 million people aged 0 to 4. So again, you can see this unhealthy trend starting. This unhealthy trend causes, because these generations, you might think of them as being individual things. Obviously, over time, this is changing. I'm going to be moving this year from, oh no, I'm 25 already. Last year, I moved from being this category in the UK. Let's find the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, shall we? As you can see, in the UK, I moved from this group last year to this group. Wow, it's interesting. I'm in a bigger group now. That's exciting. But basically, as you can see, like you move every year. Oh, here's a fun graph to show the United States and be like, yeah, there's like a big bulge. And this bulge means that right now, if we can pause this, we can't pause this GIF because it's just a GIF. It's one of those cool GIF fees. If you look right now, 2020, there's a lot of baby boomers retiring. We call them baby boomers, but let's just, people, there was a big boom of people that are now retiring. It's going to hit people hard. The retirement cost to society is super high, whether it's borne by the individual or borne by the society. Right now, we choose the society, but we're trying to transition to the individual. Funnily enough, just after all the big boom happens. But it's super interesting, and this is going to happen to China. China is going to have this problem where if we go back to them, China in the next 20 years or so, a bunch of people are going to retire. This it's funny, having this huge bulge of population retire in the next 10 to 15 years is going to mean they need to be replaced. But these 120 million people in 15 years are going to retire, and so they're going to be replaced in 15 years by, is that 85 million people? 95 million people. No, wait, 90 million people. 85 million people. I don't know why I'm bad at maths. 85 million people have to replace 120 million. And then after that, obviously, it's going to be 122 million people being replaced by even fewer than that. And you just have this huge problem of people, the replacement rate does not work. And so things start to, maybe contract a little bit. And even if you ignore that, even if you ignore the specific social problems of like, you want a lot of people in these age groups that China doesn't have right now, and they're not going to have for a while. Again, people are most productive at this point in their careers, generally speaking. The end result is their population, which is currently the world's highest. I checked, as you can see. I always thought India was going to like catch up and overtake them at some point, but I guess it's going to take quite a few years for that to happen. But as you can see, China, with its 1.4 billion people being the world's largest country, may not stay there forever because their population is going to decline. Again, it's crazy. The world population went from 2 billion to 2.5 billion to 7 billion, but China's went from 600 million to 1.4 billion. It's insane. Like statistically, like what, every fifth person is Chinese or something. Like again, the fact it actually isn't that surprising that there are more people aged 30 to 34 in China than there are people in Japan and any of the other bottom countries. But yeah, lots of countries have to deal with this. Interestingly enough, this is why if we look at India, you can see their graph. It looks much healthier. Again, were India in the same economic situation as China, they'd be doing just about fine. You can see it's slowly starting to drop off, but again, it's not an immediate problem. They've got like 50, 60 years to deal with this, maybe. But there's this interesting thing where like, this is why people predict the rise of China. This is China's century is a narrative they really like. But one of the interesting things about the United States is just, I'm here right now, so I'm very biased. I mean, who can even trust the United States of America? I mean, they stole that first part of the name from the United Kingdom. I'm just saying, throwing it out there. But they also stole, there's some funny joke about stealing our tea, but let's not go with it right now. Let's instead talk about the fact that here you can see the United States of America's population is steadily increasing. And the reason why is because even though Americans definitely want to have fewer children, you can see actually the graph is trending downwards. The thing that they do that most countries do not is the United States of America, something melting pot, right? Something a nation of immigrants. And actually, this is one of the shifts that you're seeing in a lot of European countries. The more successful ones are also starting to, again, you can see the birth rate is declining. The number of children here is pretty low. Look at that. About 15 years ago, 15 to 19 years ago, people had very few children, and who can blame them? Children suck, and so yeah, it's interesting to see that like the end result. How do you fix that? Is with immigration, and that's so a lot of countries that used to be very ethnically homogenous, their plan to counteract the low growth. The solution they're seeing that Japan didn't is like, what if you get a bunch of people to fill this gap without having to create them yourselves? And the way you create citizens without creating people is obviously immigration. So this is a really interesting one. Both China and India are net immigrant countries. People leave the country more than they join the country. It's actually quite hard to become Chinese or become Indian. But becoming a United States citizen, the way you do it is you join the country, right? And so that is the kind of like hidden bullet. As you can see, the US has more immigrants than any other country in the world by a pretty shocking margin, right? Like it's the United States, then it's Germany. Germany's in a weird phase right now, and a lot of those migrants come from within Europe. The EU specifically. But if you look at like the United States compared to Turkey or the UK, the next biggest countries, it's like, whoa, yeah, it turns out having a net positive immigrant flow is actually a semi-rare thing. You can see only most countries have it in the thousands or the tens of thousands, but then there are countries all the way up here. And this is why within these countries, especially, it's interesting because one of the things that ties a lot of people try to be like, oh, I hate people who live in those English-speaking countries. There's something about it that makes you arrogant or whatever. And so you can see like, oh yeah, Australia, Canada, I'm sure we'll find New Zealand. They've got a very low population, so it's going to be quite low down. But where's New Zealand? Oh, there's Ireland. Again, really high proportional to its population. New Zealand, net inflow countries, net countries that people go to. And so that's got a very interesting effect on why Japan is very different to these countries. And also, I don't know how China does fix this. Can China make people have more children by telling them they can? Probably not. There's probably something more to it. And so yeah, population pyramids, aren't they fascinating? Yes, they are. I'll look at Hong Kong. Oh, Hong Kong's so weird. Look at that. That male-female balance is so off. I wonder why that is. I mean, I'm not saying there was a war 35 to 39 years ago, but it looks like there was one, right? I wonder why women were, or like female babies were much more preferred at that point. That is fascinating. It must suck to be a woman in Hong Kong, right? Like, good luck finding a gentleman. Or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. So, yeah, it's really interesting how these, like, minor balances can affect some... Seriously, this is fascinating. Should we look at other countries? Let's go. I guess we'll just go with Africa as the continent first, just so you can see, like, yep, this is a whole continent thing. Whereas if we go to like Europe as a continent, it's like, oh, yep, I see the issue there. If we go to Eastern Europe, you can see they're doing a little healthier, a little bit weird. Whereas if you go to Western Europe, you can see how like, oh yeah, we have a problem brewing here, the exact same problem as China, minus the Great Leap Forward. If you go to Southern Europe, you can see how it's worse actually. Whereas if you go to Northern Europe, you can see how it's actually surprisingly stable. Surprisingly. Yeah, there's lots of very interesting things we can take from this. I think Latin America is always the one that always shocks me though, right? Because like they are semi-wealthy countries mostly. They're all in the developing middle-income kind of region for the most part, and they still are just about managing population growth. Although again, it looks like every country that is set to grow and become high income has this hurdle to pass. And so my big question, because the simple answer is like, oh yeah, so people stop having babies when they earn a certain amount of money, or have access to education, or stop caring about religion, because religion and babies correlate super strongly. That's why. Can we go by American state actually? Can we go to Utah? We can't. But that's why if you look at one of the fastest growing states is Utah, because something about religion and babies, you work out the rest. So whatever the reason is like something about high-income countries developing causes this to happen, whereas when you're still in the developing phase, like Africa is, you can see you've got like endless runway ahead of you. The more people are sad and living in squalor in your nation, the better off you'll do. Whereas if we go to Australia and New Zealand, you can see how, again, fewer people are having children because something money. Or maybe you think it's about social support systems. One of my solutions, bit radical, is like, let's just all have children, someone else, and then be like, let's let someone else deal with that for 20 years, then I'll come back to it. But now we're talking about the very social fabric of our very systems that maybe isn't so smart, and my ideas are terrible and we should not implement them. But yeah, basically, the problem that immigrant-heavy nations have, which again, it's going to be 100 years till it's a big one, is what exactly do you do? Exactly what happens when the countries that are mostly immigrating to yours stop having people? If you look at a really sad example is like Bulgaria, right? If we go to Bulgaria, which is a massive source of immigrants to the rest of Europe, it's like, well, there's not going to be enough Bulgarians to borrow, you know? Like you're running out of the number of them to have in your nation. If we look at I think another example is like Latvia, right? If you look at these countries, when their populations decline this sharply over time, how do you fill the gap? And so that is that's like an issue that's 100 years away. China has the much more immediate issue of like, oh god, we tell people they couldn't legally have children, and then now that we want them to legally have children, people have this big thing of like, oh, as it turns out, who wants to have 3 kids? Young people could have 2 kids at most. The fundamental issue is living costs are too high because, you know, well, apparently living in a rich society means people buy things and make it expensive and But that's not an issue for now. What is an issue, by the way, I want to just mention, because China's breach of the human right to... I wanted to look into it, which human right they breach specifically. China breaches the right to marry and have a family. And this kind of proves the point that, like, these are your UN human rights, right? The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it's funny because one of the human rights, ignoring the one to democracy, which, I mean, I hate to break it to you, I feel like China might have breached that one. But also the right to assemble. You're not... Yeah, that happens a lot of the time. We'll ignore that one. But, like, it's funny because the 30th human right is the fact that you can't take away the human rights. And, like, I feel like, you know, like, again, right now everyone agrees, like, well, your human rights, it's fine to take those away because, you know, special circumstance. Think you're fine, that's a breach of your human rights too. And it's kind of weird to me that if you breach any human right, you also breach the 30th one. And so, yeah, I don't know. Isn't that interesting? You know, when Australia breached, which one is it? The right to... I think it was 13. When Australia breached this one, right? You know, they're actually breaching 2 human rights at the same time. And maybe that's fascinating to you. Maybe you don't care. Maybe instead you just want to know, hey, Toycat, I hear subscribing to your channel is a really good idea. Did you know the Holy See has 800 people in there? Which is, at time of recording, fewer people than are subscribed to the IBX2Cat channel. Actually, I want to see do they even exist? What is the population? Wait, maybe it's under Holy See? No, okay, we'll go to like, what would it be, like Tokelau? Please tell me Tokelau's in here. Tokelau's not in here. Okay, is Monaco in here? Man, all the microstates. Where are you at, Liechtenstein? Man, this is sad. This is a bad day for... Can we at least have Malta? You know, there we go, Malta. Look at that. Look at Malta's graph. Let's find the lowest... Okay, so if you look at the population by country and you compared my subscriber count, there are 143 times as many people subscribed to my channel as there are people in the Holy See. And it's about 140 to 100 times as many as live in Tokelau, Niue, the Falkland Islands, and if we scroll all the way up the list, right now I'm in pretty... You know, I've cleared Kiribati, which... Wait, let's go look at Kiribati. Kiribati, I'm sorry. If you look at this country, they are growing at a substantial rate. So, everyone, if you're watching this video, if you want me to still have a higher population than Kiribati, there's only one way we can do this. They're having too many children too fast, and so I need you to, right now, hit this subscribe button right now. Right? There's a little bell next to it. I hear good things happen when you hit all next to that. I mean, I upload like once every two weeks to a month, it looks like. So I have like big bursts of videos on this channel, don't I? And then big droughts. You know what? Maybe I'm busy with other things. Some people say second channel don't care. I say, what do you mean second channel? I think you'll find this is the main channel. And yeah, if you want me to have as many subscribers as Curacao, Guam, the Channel Islands, or if we're going insane, St. Lucia, then make sure you subscribe. And even better, okay, hear me out, right? Because if you look at St. Lucia's population, you can see how, I thought they'd be a growing country. That's shocking. Their population's going down too. I guess it is. It's too well off for their own good. So people in St. Lucia are going to start dying in the next 10 to 15 years, and they're not going to be replaced. They're still going to grow their population for a while. We've got to catch up with St. Lucia. So you need to have children. I am now officially, as of this moment, legally stopping the one child policy the IBX2Cat channel has. You can now officially have children, have as many as you can, and make sure they stay subscribed so that we can beat, one day, St. Lucia. That's all I want. Thank you for watching. Second channel, don't care. This is why I don't post videos, because it ends up, this is meant to be a video about China, and we ended up competing with St. Lucia. But isn't that the fun? I think that is the fun. So thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. My thumbnails have, like, no consistency to them, and I love it. Goodbye.